This is Don Quixote and his friend Sancho Panza, and of course they were from Spain, so they have a little park that's dedicated to them. But the point of that is the vision. He had a vision. As you know, he was the one who went tilting at windmills, and he was after Dulcinea. He was his love, she was his idol, and his idea was to have everything to be perfect. He kind of lived in a fantasy world. Unfortunately, we don't live in a fantasy world, but we do have to do what he does, and that is have some goals. And his mission was to go out there into Spain, ride around with Sancho Panza, who kept him out of trouble, tried to keep him out of trouble, and then go after all of the enemies and vanquish them so that especially Dulcinea would be very impressed with him and they could live happily ever after. In the community association world, there was something that I read about last week that I thought was really interesting. You might have seen it in the Tennessean. They ran a story about a new community that they're talking about building in Germantown in Nashville. It's going to have 22 homes, and it's going to be called co-housing. They will be condominiums, and so the buildings will be attached, but everybody is going to share a kitchen area and living area. So I don't know whether they're going to be studio apartments or what they are, but then they will all be able to eat in a common area. They said it won't be a commune in the sense that they will be contributing to a common kitty, you might say, but it's going to be a very different way for anybody in downtown Nashville to be living. And they had over 150 people show up at a presentation about this, and they're only going to have 22. Kind of interesting. The people who have this in mind, and they really think they're going to be breaking ground this year and building it next year, they really think there will be 22 people who are going to completely change their lifestyles and live together to form a real community. The eating in common, that whole business about buying food in common, that whole concept is something that we don't even think about when we're thinking of community associations. But this indeed will be a community association. They have a vision of a community, and over the next year they're going to be working toward that vision, and they're in the process now taking the first step, which was to determine who's going to be interested, and then secondly, of course, finding a contractor. They are going to be working with a developer/builder with whom they will collaborate on the actual design of the community, which I think is wonderful. We all live in community associations, and can you imagine having had the opportunity to talk to our developer right at the very beginning and say, this is what I would love you to have you do to make our place more attractive, or to incorporate some features that would give us a greater sense of community. So it was a very, very interesting concept. We have a developer here. We have several people here who are in communities that are still under development. And then the rest of us, of course, are living in communities that have been turned over to boards of directors. But if you're going to stay on track, if you're going to see your community thrive, if you're going to see it not just stay where it is, but get better over time, you have to have a point, a goal, someplace that you want to get to. And that's your vision. Your vision is your goal. What would you like to see your community be? If you think about where you live, there is something about it that makes it unique. It might be the location. It might be the housing type. It might be the fact that the houses are really close together or very far apart. It may be that you have sidewalks or you don't have sidewalks, and that's what you think is good. It may be that your community is very attractive to people who are retired. Or it may be that it's very attractive to people who are first or second time home buyers. All of those markets have different interests, and it's interesting to me that different communities attract the same type. Where I live, I've lived there for 30 years now, and when I moved there, the place was 2 years old, and most of us were pretty much the same age. As time has gone on, it now attracts retired people, people who are older even than I am. And I've often wondered, why is it that they are attracted to this community? And I realize it's because it's quiet, it's convenient, it's open, it allows some flexibility for people to have their own gardens if they want to, but the community is taking care of the buildings. That was by chance. And I often think, and especially as I've been working on this presentation and updating it, I was thinking, what could we have been doing in these last 30 years to make it even more attractive to that kind of a buyer? We just kind of fell into that, really without any plan. You have the opportunity to think about it, to think, what would you like to do with the community and just what is your goal? What's your vision of the community? The mission that you have, and we'll be talking about how you create that, the mission is how you get to your goal. Very, very simply. How you attain the vision. Why would you bother to do this? Now, we had something in January, and some of these people attended, where we broke into, I think it was 3 small groups, and they talked about planning, what they would like to do in the coming year for the community. And I think we talked about things like lights. Didn't we talk about, it was lighting and a couple of different, was it lighting? A couple different things. Was it lighting that you talked about in the round table? And I think something about budget. Somebody wanted to do signs. I think they wanted to do signs. They were going to figure out how they were going to pay for the signs or whatever it was. If you do that kind of thinking, if you do that exercise yourselves and also encourage your other board members, you will develop some cohesion. You will be working together, and you will be looking beyond what you're doing today. Certainly in this business, as managers of community associations, it's very easy for us to get bogged down in the day-to-day, just keeping everything going, just putting out all of the fires, taking care of the contracts, making sure the pool is open, making sure all these different things are happening, doing the minutes, introducing the board members to each other. All these things, we can all get so bogged down in the now that we forget what it's all about. And sitting back and establishing some goals really helps give meaning to what you're doing as a board. And as we've said before, if you have focus, you're going to be more effective as a board member, and you will also make that position more attractive to other owners in your community. I can't stress that enough. There is not an association that we have that doesn't struggle with filling vacancies on the board. It's hard to even get a quorum at annual meetings. Everybody thinks they're unique on that, and they're not. How do you get that kind of support? You get it because the board has to make an effort as a community leader. You have to have some vision, and you have to communicate that to your owners. We have an association that has always struggled with quorums, this one particular one. The manager was just telling me this morning that they decided that they were going to publish 4 newsletters a year, and they were not going to email it. Not going to email it. They wanted to have everybody get the newsletter on the same day, so they're not emailing them, and they wanted to make sure that everybody got them. In addition, the board has updates that they email to the people who are interested about once every 2 weeks, just little things that the board might be working on. They doubled the number of proxies that they received, and they may even get a quorum this year, be the first time in a long time, just by that level of communication. That's because they had a vision. What's the vision? We want a quorum, simple short-term vision, short-term goal. How are we going to achieve it? Communication, this is what we're going to do. There are the steps. Of course, if you have a vision, it does make your job easier. You think it doesn't, but it really does. If you think about just showing up for the board meeting unprepared, or you have other people, I'm sure that you're all prepared, but you have people who just show up and they haven't even thought about the community association since the last meeting, since they walked out the door. You've got somebody who really isn't contributing anything and really is not helping further the interests of the board of directors. And if you get enough people like that on the board of directors, you have a board that isn't effective at all. You're just kind of spending your time, spinning your wheels, waiting for your term to end. You're here because you have a greater interest in your community. You would like to see that not happen. Some examples of what your vision could be for your community. The best place for families to live. If that's what you're thinking about for your community, when you're thinking about families, you're probably thinking of at least 2 generations. That is, some parents with children, possibly even 3 generations with grandparents. You're usually thinking about some common area where you might want to put a play area. You may think about an existing pool where you would want to be able to accommodate children of all ages. You may be thinking of social events that will encourage neighbors to get together, like an Easter egg hunt or some kind of a fun fair on a cul-de-sac. Those are the things. That's your goal. How are you going to reach it? Then just think when you're thinking about it. Don't just think, oh, we can't do that. Write it down and then figure out if you can do it. Don't say, oh, we can't do it because. That's not the way to do it. This is what you want to do. It's a realistic goal. How can we do that? We don't have any common areas. We don't have any place to put a playground. Well, that doesn't mean that there isn't some other way that you can make the community attractive to families. If you're in a subdivision, everybody's taking care of their own homes, and maybe a lot of the people have their own pools. Maybe you don't even have a pool. How do you want to make it attractive to them? Well, it would be the events, wouldn't it? It would be the social events that the board of directors encourages people to have. A lot of associations have cul-de-sacs. They're good streets, good places to have an event that you can just close off and have a fun fair. Something like that. Maybe there's a local church or a community center that you could talk to and have them see if they would have a room available to you or a play area where you could have a community-sponsored event. We've had at least one community that partnered with another community to have an event. They didn't have some facilities. The one down the way did, and they got together and they had something there again to promote the visibility of the community. Maintaining a sense of community, volunteer work. If you want to let your place be known by others, a very good way to do that is to have some kind of a community project. Most of the time when we think of a community project, we think about ourselves. We're having a community project next Saturday, and it's to plant tulips for next year, or it's to clear out the dead bushes, or it's to paint the clubhouse. It's all about us. You could also build community by saying, let's get a group of us together and we're going to have a clothing drive. Or there's a charity that's nearby and we're going to have a group of us serve lunch there one Saturday every 2 months or something like that. And we're all going to have a little name tag that says, I'm from Autumn Oaks, or I'm from Providence, or wherever I'm from. Those are nice ways to build community. People get to know about your place. They think, boy, these are nice people. This is the kind of people that I'd like to live with. When I buy my home, I'm certainly going to look there. And you're going to be developing a really wonderful sense of pride in your community. You can see, there are communities in Nashville that do this, or greater Nashville that do this. So these things that you can think about. Your goal, is it realistic? Be very general. You don't have to be specific. These are long-term visions. Your short-term goals will be different. That might be the one for getting the signs, for example. It might be for getting the quorum at the board meeting, something that's attainable, but something that's going to build toward the future of the association. You don't want your community to be stagnant. I shouldn't be saying that my place is the same as it was 15 years ago or 10 years ago, certainly not 30 years ago. Here's an example of a mission statement. Our mission is to provide our owners with an outstanding quality of life, promote community, and provide the most prudent, ethical, financially sound, team-oriented, creative, and state-of-the-art governance within our capability. That's very nice. To me, it says too much. That is just so big. It's going to be very, very hard to wrap yourselves around that and to turn that into a set of steps and missions. So I would say that you might be able to separate this mission statement into smaller goals. For example, the outstanding quality of life, and we'll use the example of the community that you want to remain family friendly. What is going to be quality of life? One thing will be safety. What does that mean? Maybe it means that you improve the lighting in the community. Maybe the developer didn't put any street lights in, and at night it's just as dark as night can be. Maybe you want to think about looking at your budget and having a way of reaching that, putting in some street lights, polling the owners, see if they would agree to that. Some people don't like street lights. Getting a consultant out there to see where they should be placed, providing some light, and there again, providing some safety, which could encourage people to walk at night, to take their children out. My sister takes her baby out, or my niece takes her baby out after dinner for this little, like 2-year-old, for a walk after dinner, like 5:30. Can't do that in every neighborhood. That's one goal. Another would be promoting community, which actually is a part of all of them. And then there's a responsibility here on the part of the board. They're talking about community up here, and here they're talking about providing the prudent, ethical, financially sound, team-oriented, creative, state-of-the-art governance. All that is you. That is all you. That is the board's vision for itself. And it's certainly legitimate for you to have a vision of what your board, or what you want your board of directors to be. Ethical, very, very important. You are ethical people. You want to make sure that your volunteer job is attractive to ethical people. And again, how you set the stage for that is very important. One of the handouts refers to the manager. And as you leave the board and other people come on, typically the manager is that institutional history. Certainly we're fortunate to keep our managers for several years, and board members change all the time, and many times it's the manager who's going to be the one who remembers that 3 years ago the board of directors had a plan, and to remind the new board members that this is what it is and allow them the opportunity to update it. So keep your manager in the loop, you might say, but it's primarily your responsibility to establish these goals, always being ethical and showing that you're ethical. How do you do that? Well, you can have a mission statement. You can have a vision and mission statement for your board of directors. I would say less ambitious than this. I think maybe this part would be yours, that part would be the community. And your part would be, say, part of the ethics is that we are always going to treat our owners fairly. That even if I have a personal bias against someone or for someone in the community, that I am not going to instruct the board, I'm not going to instruct the manager to ignore this person and to really come down hard on that person when it comes to a compliance issue. Again, you're always speaking to the choir, but remember these things because you are going to see people on your boards of directors who are tempted to do that. We're all human, and we're definitely going to favor our friend. We know all of our friends' circumstances. We know that they've had somebody in the family has lost a job, and so they can't afford a place to store their RV, and now they're storing it in the yard, and I understand that. And so let's just give them a little bit of flack. I don't know anything about this guy over here. He has a commercial truck that he's parking in his yard, and I say, you can't do that. Well, as an ethical board of directors, you can't make the distinction. These owners have a responsibility to meet the community standards, whatever they are. Your requirement as a board of directors is to administer those standards fairly. That's the ethical part. The prudent, we're talking about prudent. Let's just say that's your vision. What do you think about, well, what's prudence? Well, prudence is planning. Prudence is being sensible. Prudence is looking at the money that you have and knowing if it's enough. And if you have something that has to be done and you ignore that and you keep your fees artificially low, you are not being prudent. You are not being prudent. You are simply passing the problem on to somebody else. Financially sound, of course, is related to that. Team-oriented, as I say, meeting once a quarter. 6 months is sometimes good, but I'd say once a quarter is good. Team-oriented, how are you going to build a team? You don't build a team by email. You don't build a team by mail. You build a team because you see each other, you talk to each other, and you exchange ideas. You not only express your ideas, but you listen. Always listen. Because we've all played that, and I think I've mentioned this before, where you're on a team and everybody comes up with an idea, and no idea is as good as the one that they all worked on together. That's definitely true with the board of directors. That's why boards have more than one person on them, so that you can learn from each other and then come out with a really, really good solution for whatever it is. Creativity is something that we don't really think about very often when we think of community associations. And we're not saying that you have to be an artist. We mean creative. Be thinking about things that are going to do more than just keep things level. What can I do that's just different, that's going to give some life to this community? And it's going to take some effort. And you may find that it's not successful the first time. You can't give up. What about if you have a clubhouse, for example? What about having a lending library? How about if you have a community association with a lot of people who are retired, you may have a book club. You may get 3 people. That's 3 more people than 0. So you're okay. Word gets out. Lending library is wonderful. A book exchange is another idea. Maybe you're in a community and most people here don't have small children, so let's just say that you're all at the grandparents' age. Well, what if you get to know your neighbors well enough, maybe there's a way that several grandparents get together, they can take all the children and go to the playground, or, I don't know, go to some place and have some creative play, or go take a lot of little kids to Gymboree together, or something like that. Be creative. What can you do to be together, to create this community that somebody says, I really like living in this community. It's made a difference to me. Nobody else does this kind of thing. Some of your communities have, let me see, the smallest has about 50, and then we have one that has 1,300 homes. It's a tremendous range. So it's very obvious that when I'm saying these things, you're all hearing something different. And there's a reason, because you're applying it to your own association. But as we're talking about this, remember what I said at the very beginning, is that all of these things that we're talking about in terms of visions and mission, you can apply to other activities that you're involved in. Your church group, if you're a parent-teachers organization, if it's a fraternal organization, anything, charitable organization, some of you may be on the boards of some charities, having a vision, having a mission, distinguishing between short and long-term goals, all things that can help you very, very much in putting some order into your board activity, far beyond what an agenda can do. I remember not the first time I did this one, but one of the first seminars that I did for board, was several years ago, and this one person came in and he said, well, I don't really know why I'm here, because he said, you know, the board's working all right and all that stuff. And I said, well, are you involved in anything else? And he said, well, yeah, I think he was in the Rotary Club. And he was quite active in the Rotary Club. And I said, well, if you don't think this applies to your association, I said, well, just think of the Rotary Club and how you could be using this in that group. And then he started taking all these notes. It was kind of interesting. So a lot of what we do in volunteer work can be transferred to other experiences. When you're creating the vision, as I mentioned before, who lives there now? You have, well, we have a large community. McKays Mill has, what, 1,300 homes. And I mean, that's a lot. So everybody lives there because it's so big. It's a town. You know, they even have a grocery store nearby and a drugstore and all this stuff and a daycare center and all that stuff. Everybody lives there. But how do they want to get people to want to live in McKays Mill? How do you want to get people to live at Tulip Cove? How do you want people to do that? Just driving by and looking at the sign isn't enough. You want to draw them in, and your reputation is important. Why is it that when somebody goes in there, they make an offer on the house or the condominium or the townhome? What is it? What is that? Think about what that is. Why is it that you bought your place? Maybe you bought it, maybe you're the first owner. Maybe you're not the first owner. Why did you go in and you said, you know, not just the dwelling, but what about this other area? What did appeal to you? That's what you want to capture. You want to think what other people do and say, that's it. And not only do we want to keep that, we want to make it better. People are more careful with their money now. Housing values have dropped. By the same token, people are not willing to spend as much anyway. So there has to be something that's going to attract them, to make them see that there is some value to living where you live. A place that they can be proud of, that they can be a part of. And that's your job. The part of the job that we forget as board members is that something special and keeping that going. The appearance is definitely part of it, but there's that intangible people thing. You go Green Hills, how long is Green Hills Terrace, how old is it? 30 years old? 30 years old? 25, 67? 1967. They were apartments first, right? Then they were converted to condominiums. You've got people who've been living there for probably 30 years since they were converted to condominiums. Why do they stay in Green Hills? Why do they stay? There's a reason that they stay, and a lot of the reason has to do that they've had boards of directors that really, really think about the little stuff, the landscaping, the encroachments on the common areas. What does the pool look like? How do we see to it that people don't get into the pool after hours? How is the pool secured? Is it, do we have a common area, a party room where people can go? Is that attractive for people to use so that they're proud to have an event there? Thinking about, you don't want to be dated, and they're going through a lot of this stuff, so I use them as an example, but I gave a presentation last week, and Deborah was with me, and I said, a beautiful club, but Deborah said, oh, it's a beautiful clubhouse, and so in the course of it, I said, well, you know, they said, well, what difference can you make? And I said, well, one thing is you always want to be looking to the future. And I said, maybe you're going to look at your clubhouse and you're going to say, you don't want it to be a 1980s clubhouse anymore. I don't think they like that. But it was a 1980s clubhouse. And these are, maybe they don't want to be a night. It looks great. It's immaculate. Paint's perfect. Nothing's smudged. Everything's clean. All that stuff. But maybe you want to update it. So look at your things with new eyes. What is it that makes? Why do you stay? And why are people moving in there? And why do they sell? Why do they sell? I don't know if you've had this, but I sure have. Where they say, I can't believe the board of directors is doing this. I'm so mad I'm going to sell. I'm thinking, and I used to think, oh, that's terrible. I just feel so responsible. And maybe I was. But you think, why are they selling? Sometimes it's, yeah, that's right. You really should, because this isn't for you. This is the condominium. You want to have your boat in your yard. You don't have a yard. You don't. You want to have your trailer out there. We don't have a room for the trailer. You're right. You really need to live someplace else. But sometimes people live want to move because something's missing. The place isn't being maintained. The board isn't taking care of the entrance anymore. There's no sense of movement. It's just kind of stayed, and the place it looks the same. It's just like where it was, only it's worse because nothing's been done. People sell for a lot of different reasons, and if you hear why, and you think, you might hear that it's partly because they didn't want to stay, not just because they wanted to move someplace else. Think about what makes your community unique. They're all unique. There is something about where you live that is unique. Think about that and build on it, whatever it is. It might be a name. We manage a community called Founders Point in Franklin. Well, that's a name. I didn't know. Founders Point. Thought, well, who cares? Well, one of our managers is really into the Revolutionary War stuff, and he discovers that the founder of Franklin is buried there. I forgot his name. He was buried in Founders Point. That's why they call it Founders Point. So you have this great big beautiful community association that's got this little grave site. It's not as big as this room. It's probably like that. And everybody drives around the cemetery and nobody knows who it is. And they're going to have a memorial in June or July. There's going to be all these people are coming in from all over the country, and they're going to have a little ceremony. People are going to dress up in revolutionary clothes, which is going to be kind of neat. And they're going to get somebody in here, and it's some outside group, and they're going to come in and honor this founder of Franklin. And so our manager approached the manager of the community, and he said, oh, well, this is what's going on. And she didn't understand what it was, so I said, oh, I'll tell her. And she said, oh my God. She said, that's happening? I said, yeah. I said, this should be in the paper. It needs to be in the Franklin paper. I mean, what a thing. You've got a really neat historical place there. Nobody even knows it. And it's this cemetery, and that's why it's called Founders Point. And a lot of people are really into that, and you can get some publicity, and people can, learn more about your neighborhood and all that stuff. So I think they're going to make a bit of a deal of it. So sometimes it's the name of your community. Just telling people about that can be fun. Think about your vision for your community. That is your vision for your community. Just yours, not anybody else's. And write it down. And then discuss it with other board members. So you might think of it in the car on the way back to your home or your office or wherever you're going after this. What is it? Maybe just one thing. And write it down. Might be a couple of one things. Mention it to the board of directors. Now, it can be embarrassing to do this because we all get in the board meeting and we don't really know these people very well, and so you think, oh, it's kind of funny to tell people what my vision is of my community association. So you don't have to say it that way. You can say, I was just thinking the other day, why don't we do this? Why don't we have this as a goal? Why don't we just see if we could put some streetlights up? And I'll get the manager to find out whom we can contact, and we'll just see if we could get some streetlights. And somebody says, yeah, I don't think that's a good idea. Or, yep, sounds good. There you are. You've got kind of a vision of a vision, being able to see better, and discuss it with the board members. And you don't have to call it a vision because maybe that sounds too formal, but that's what you're doing. And then you get some information on the lights, and you say, now that this is so good, maybe we should have maybe we should just tell everybody that every night at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock or something, there's just going to be a walk. And anybody who wants to join the walk can do that. And we'll walk for half an hour or 20 minutes or something. In some of your neighborhoods, that would work. And we're just going to walk. Well, that's it. What's your vision? Your vision is to create community, right? Your mission, your way of doing it is to get people together. You're providing the light. So you can see how things can build on it. Just build, build, build. Reaching a common vision, you've got short-term things, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then you've got your long-term goals, but it does need to be communicated and it does need to be shared. You may have a vision that nobody else has in your community. You may have gotten on the board because you have an absolute thing about trash cans, and people do. Absolute thing about trash cans. Cannot stand them, just do not want to see them except on trash pickup day. That is it. Except nobody else, or say 60% of the owners, keep their trash cans out. And not only that, it's not in the documents. There's no restriction on that. You are probably fighting a losing battle. And your vision is not one that you will be able to share with anybody else, because you're already not sharing it. So when you're thinking about these things, do be practical. Know what your governing documents say, know what your budget restrictions are, know what your community is like and where it's going. Sometimes your vision is very good. Your vision is that you don't want to have any trash cans out, and it is in the documents. And it's still 60% of the people who keep the trash cans out. But you really believe that it's going to be important to the community association to change that look, because when people come in, it looks awful. It just looks awful. It's cluttered with garbage cans on the street, and some of them are in the front yard, and some are in the driveway, and some are tipped over, and all this stuff. It just looks awful, because a lot of people do notice this. Well, what do you do? So what do you do? You're going to have to talk to your other board members, and you're going to have to get people and other people to buy in to your vision, and you're going to have to figure out a way to sell that, to show them that that really is going to be beneficial to them, to take the trouble to put their garbage cans into the garage or behind a bush or whatever your documents say. So what's going to help to maintain it, but it does have to be a common vision. You will have people who will come on the board of directors and they have one thing in mind, and sometimes it's one thing that's just for me. You know, it's I have a fence, I want to build this fence, and I happen to like dog-eared fences. Except dog-eared fences are not allowed. So I figure if I get on the board of directors, I'm in a position of power, and I can change it so that dog-eared fences are allowed, and then I can put mine up. That is not the kind of vision we're talking about. We're talking about a vision with a goal, not just something that I want as an individual. Remembering the long and the short term, and as I say, we'll talk about that. So if you're going to have some short-term goals, just do a few. Like, remember that mission statement, that vision statement that we must have had about 8 different things. It was too much. That was a lot of goals, not one goal. Try to separate them. One of the reasons that you're separating them, especially with the long-term goals, is that long-term goals are achieved gradually. Now, this seems obvious, but when you're in the process, you forget this. A long-term goal is achieved gradually. Gradually means 2 things. For one thing, gradually means it's over time, but the other thing, it's in parts. So when you have something that you're going to do over the long term, break it up into smaller pieces. The example with the lights might have been a silly one, but it is an illustration. It said, well, you know what, we want to make it a more safe neighborhood. Let's put some street lights in. Now that we've got the street lights, it's more attractive for walking. And so with walking, let's build walking clubs, or let's have, we now can do other things because we can see, whatever it is. Maybe we'll put sidewalks in, or maybe we'll put stepping stones back to the common area so that people can have events back there, or something like that. It builds on it. But you can have a goal, a long-term one. Look at it as a series of not only time-wise steps, but also pieces. This helps you in a couple of ways. For one thing, you have a sense of achievement. If you say, we're going to do this, hey, we're going to have this done in 5 years, you know, so at the end of 5 years, if you haven't done it, and all those 5 years, you're just kind of, yep, in 5 years, and 4 years, and 3 years, you know, it's not the same. But if you say, we're going to have this done in 6 months, we're going to have this done 12 months later, and so forth, you're more likely to achieve it. Another thing is that you have goals, you have visions. This is 2012. In 2 years, something might have changed that will want you to revise that, to revisit that. And you've got a 2-pager, I think it's another one anyway, one of those, that says something about that. Be open to changing. Don't say, look, it is written in stone, all of the roofs are going to be done by the end of 2013. I know the gutters are falling off. We don't care about gutters. There's a board of directors that actually said this to us 2 weeks ago. We don't care about gutters. People's gutters are falling off, right? I mean, gutters and downspouts they're not even cleaning in a consistent way. All of their focus is on the roofs. Well, you know what's happening to everything else, because they're saying, we're not going to do anything with gutters until we finish roofs. You can't, you have to be looking at it and saying, that was a goal that we set 2 years ago that we would finish by 2013, but now our gutters are in problem. We need to look at this again. That's not to say we're not going to finish the roofs. It's just that we now have to look at gutters as well and maybe extend those roofs out another year so we can start they're beyond repair, have got to be replaced. So you've got the vision, and that's very good, and you've established this, but nothing is written in stone. And if you have it in pieces, it's easier for you to take apart. My goal this year is to read 12 books in the whole year, which is, for some of you think, oh, I read 5 in a week. Well, good for you. I don't. I would love to read a lot, but when I work, I don't read a lot. So I thought, this is crazy. I have been trying to do this for a couple of years, so I told myself 1 book a month. And I said to myself, if I read 2 in a month, it's only going to count as 1 book. We all do these things. Anyway, it's working. I am really making myself sit down at night and read a book, so I'm going to reach my goal of 12 books in 2012. Actually, it's probably going to be more than 12. And it's a really big deal for me, but it's because I broke it down month by month. I didn't say, coming in October, oh my goodness, I haven't met my goal, and so I can feel all terrible on New Year's Eve or something. So anyway, that's just a thought about that. Inspiring a shared vision. It's work, as I say, it's the part we don't think about. It's much easier to have the board meeting, go home, do your stuff by email, communicate with the manager, show up at the next board meeting, go through all that stuff, and really not have much to do with the community. But really, that's not enough. You've got to get out there and communicate with the owners. Newsletters are a wonderful vehicle. I happen to think that emailing the newsletters is great. I think that having something in the newsletters besides telling people what they can't do is really important. Some of the newsletters are really just they're just a list of, just want to remind you what the rules are, and by the way, you can't do that. And oh, gee, I know, over and over and over and over and over again, yeah. If you don't have a lot for a newsletter, don't call it a newsletter. First of all, because it's not news. But think about some news. There must be something that's happening someplace that you could put in there. Maybe you open it up and do what one association does, and they just list the new owners. They don't give them any information, but they say, welcome to Mr. and Mrs. Smith. They've just moved into 354 Campbell Street. That's it. And they tell the owners they're going to do that. Well, that's nice. You kind of know that, what their name is, and if you see them at Kroger, you can say hi. And it's news anyway. Some places where you might have a more intimate setting, you might say if somebody's just been married, or if there's been a baby, or some places if they're close enough, and you could have a place, you might have condolences. You definitely want to tell people personal things like, you have a new board. Oh, what a novelty. You had a quorum at let's just say you were lucky enough to have a quorum at your annual meeting, so that's taken care of. And then, the manager starts getting calls, and they say, well, who's the board members? Oh, well, they were not letting me, when they want to save money, they don't want me to send out a broadcast message to tell you who the new board members are. Well, let them know this is the new board. You may not want to share your telephone numbers, but if you live in a subdivision, you might want to tell them where you live, or maybe not the street, but Mrs. Smith just got on the board, and she lives on Campbell Street. So you know that somebody in that section of the neighborhood has a representation. You can do something like that. You have 5 board members. All these things that you can do. Of course, the manager, we have access to literally a volume of copyright-free articles that are written for community associations to put into their newsletters. Don't pay anything for them. They're in Word format, so that you can change them, and they don't care. They wrote it so that you could do that. So if you have a person who's interested in doing a newsletter, all they have to do is tell the manager, and we can throw them 10 or 15 articles, because they're probably close to 80 now in this library of articles, which are informative, newsy, and get people interested in the community. You can remind people what they do in the Tennessean. Every month the family section, they tell you, well, it's April, so this is the time that you cut your tulips back, or I'm not a gardener, whatever you do in April with your trees. And they go through this whole thing for the garden. Well, we have some associations in their newsletter, and they'll say, well, it's the springtime, and everybody's looking. And just to remind you that the clubhouse is going to be cleaned up, the whole area, so it's looking kind of ratty. But by the end of May, all the debris will be picked up, and we're going to cut back the bushes. Well, that's not big, but it's news, and you're telling them before it happened, which is kind of nice, instead of after it happened. Enabling others to act. That means the other people on the community, on the board, as well as other people in the community. People need permission. We talked about that last month when we were talking about sustainable landscaping. People sometimes need permission. They many times want to be invited to do something for the community, but they don't know where to start. They don't know whom to approach. They have a talent they'd like to share, but they're a bit shy. So keep your ear out, and if you discover that there's someone who has, for example, a talent for flowers, and you have the front of your clubhouse that is dying for color, that's the time to just say, you know, we really need some help. Could you help us decide what flowers are really going to look good in the front of the clubhouse? Or you have somebody who's a decorator and your clubhouse is in need of renovation, and these people have a good sense of color. You know, they can go in, they can say, these colors are going to be terrible and these colors are going to be great. That's wonderful. Could you help us do that? So invite people, enable them to be a part of your community. And always modeling the way for the future board members. You're always, remember, whatever you're doing, when you're doing it, when you're doing it in relation to the community association, you're doing it as a board member. Even if you're not, if they think you are, you're doing it as a board member. So you have to be the model, and you're the model for the people around you. And there again, you're setting expectations so that your community will continue to be well run when you decide not to serve on the board of directors anymore. We talked, as I say, we talked a little bit about it in January when we had our workshop, which was quite a lot of fun. Something that some of you may not have seen last month, I'll mention just quickly. We had 2 landscaping companies in here who did a workshop on sustainable landscaping. And as you're thinking of your vision, think of your community when you are reading the newspaper and you're reading that there are going to be water shortages, that there are problems with invasive plants in Middle Tennessee, that we have very hot summers. You don't have to read the paper for that. We have very hot summers. And you look at your grounds care and you have an opportunity to do something with your grounds. Think about what your community could look like, the potential to make your community more environmentally sustainable, you might say. Maybe you have common air, maybe you have common buildings where the roof materials, maybe you could go in for a lighter roof, which would make it less to heat and cool your clubhouse. Maybe the way that you treat drainage issues could be handled differently, so that you could create rain gardens if you had the talent for that, so that you would not have to worry about some drought areas, some dry areas. Maybe less grass, more plants. Here's something interesting I was reading about trees. You're going to have owners who are going to come to you, and it'll happen, and they're going to start asking you to put up a clothesline. Oh my goodness, a clothesline. This is a big fight out west. A big fight. Clotheslines. People have gone to court because their boards of directors have enforced the community documents that said they can't have clotheslines. And they say, I don't want to use a dryer because it uses electricity and all this stuff for the environment. It's coming. It hasn't hit Nashville yet, as far as I know, but it is coming. You may have somebody who decides in a subdivision that they want to have their whole front yard be wildflowers. That has happened in Nashville. Wildflowers, tall wildflowers. Do you want to be ready for that? Person says, I don't want grass. I ask you, do your documents specifically say that you have to have grass in your front yard? I don't think so. I think it might say that if you have grass, it can't be over 3 inches or something like that. But I don't think there are any documents that we have that specifically say that you have to have grass. So if you have somebody who comes into you, or they just do it and don't ask permission, and they start putting in low level, let's just say ground cover. They say, I'm going to put the whole front yard in a Judica. I don't know if you do that. I did this in my backyard, which is fenced so nobody can see it. Don't want to cut grass. Some people consider it a weed, but actually, apparently it isn't. Got purple flowers, and in the springtime, it grows a little sprout of really lush flowers about that, like a really rich hyacinth, which lasts for about 2 weeks. My whole yard was purple. It was wonderful. If I had put that in my front yard, people would have had heart failure. But I'm telling you, it will happen. People will say, I don't want to cut the grass. I don't believe in grass because it's not good for the environment. It's totally unnatural, which it is. And all this stuff, and you're going to be stuck because you're not going to have, you're not going to have any way. You say, well, everybody else has grass, so you have to have grass. That's not a good argument. You need to be thinking, what are we going to do? How are we going to make it something that's going to be sustainable? I'm telling you, it's going to happen, and it's going to happen in a couple of years as water becomes more and more difficult. People are not going to be able to water their lawns, and they're going to start thinking of alternatives the way they are out west. And we're going to be in trouble if we don't start laying some foundations for that. If you really like grass, you better start putting some rules in there that say you require grass in the front yard, because it's coming. Vision, I love this one. Vision without action is a daydream, but action without vision is a nightmare. It's kind of an interesting thing. Somebody said, it was a Japanese. And I wanted, this is a postscript. I've covered some of these things, but I didn't cover budgets. You've established a vision, you have some goals, things change over time. You've got to be flexible. If you have something that you think is absolutely essential to the success, the long-term success of your community, whatever it is, you do not want to sacrifice that for budget considerations. That means that when you're establishing the goal to begin with, you want to be realistic. But you also have to recognize that the financial situation can change just as anything else can change. So you have to be convinced that that vision is attainable, and you have to be looking at it and say, if we have a budget problem, what are we going to do? This is absolutely essential. I'll use my place as an example, as I often do, because it's such a good example of things that went well for so long and aren't going well now. They had bad luck with foundation problems, serious foundation problems, and water line bursts. It's condominium, and the association pays for the water. So when you have water line burst, everybody's paying for it. Last year, I think it was something like $36,000 in water and plumbing. It was just ridiculous. So I absolutely shot the repair budget, absolutely shot it. It's essential that they take care of these buildings. These are buildings with siding, kind of paint, masonite siding, which is junk. Needs to be changed to hardy plank. Some houses have not been painted in 7 years. 7 years have not been painted. You can imagine what they look like. The roofs are starting to age. Sidewalks are going. All this stuff. So the board had a plan. They had this wonderful plan. They communicated it to the owners. They even increased some fees accordingly. And it was working great for about a year and a half, 2 years. And then the water line started to burst. And a couple of foundations went. And since they're condominiums, it was the association's responsibility. Absolutely took the ground right under the feet of the board of directors. What did they do? They looked at the plan again. They said, it is absolutely essential. We cannot get sidetracked. We have to stay on target. They had to increase the fees again. Actually, the last one was a special assessment. Did a special assessment, modest special assessment, paid over a year. They didn't care. They just needed to have the money. We've got to keep this place going. And they went back on track. They went to the vendor, and they are simply extending it. But they are doing the work that they need to do to maintain it. They still have a vision. They have a goal. It's a longer-term goal than they wanted. But the short term is to do just 2 buildings this year instead of 4 and 4 last year. But they stuck to it. So no, this will happen. These obstacles will occur. But if you have a plan, if you have written it down as a board resolution, put it in a place that it's in one place, pull it out of the minutes, have it in a place so that when the new board comes, the manager will probably do this for you if you ask them to do it. This is our vision for the next 5 years. These are our goals. This is what we want to do. This is the way we intend to do it. And then when that new board of directors comes in, they don't go through this whole process again that you've gotten to. They say, okay, fine, we can see it, we understand it, and we're going to proceed with it. So that planning process is ongoing. You don't just do it once and leave it. It's just like the books. If something happens this year and I can't reach my goal of 12, tough, but I'm constantly thinking this is going to be in my mind, but I know that things can change. If you are planning and revisiting this, you are reinforcing yourself. It's like anything else. When somebody's trying to lose weight, or they're trying to get into some personal habit, they're trying to go to the gym on a regular basis, what do? You build yourself up. You think, yep, this is it. This is why I'm doing this. This is my goal. This is my goal. That's what it is with the board. Remind yourselves of this. Remind yourselves, and remind the other boards of directors. Communicate this in your newsletters. Let people know you've got a plan. That's what saved where I live, is that board. We've got a really good board, probably the best one we've had in all the time I've lived there. They communicate with the owners, the bad news as well as the good, but they don't give up. We are not giving up, they say to the owners. We've got this to do. You're going to see the people out there doing major wood repairs, not just painting, major repairs to bring your place up. And people are pleased. They understand. They communicate. And it makes such a difference to your community. You're planning, you're communicating, you're evaluating, and then assess the relevance of your goals. It may be that some goal that you had that seemed good a couple of years ago won't be good in a couple of years. The streetlights, for example, you might have had that as a goal, or you might have said that the third step to that was to put in sidewalks, and you discover that for some reason that's not practical. It would create drainage problems. Well, don't get so hung up on it that you're going to do it in spite of anything else. Be open and be willing to plan, but to know that you're probably going to have to make some modifications all the time. And your community changes. We have a lot of communities that have changes. Our community associations are typically international communities. International, you know, people, we have neighbors whose language we don't speak. And they speak English most of the time, but they're not comfortable with English, so you're hearing them speaking all these different languages. People can be threatened with that, and owners are going to come to you. They're going to come to you and say, how can we stop this? You don't want to stop that. You don't want to stop people from moving into a community, into your community. You want to make your community vibrant and welcoming. And I'm saying this is tough. It's the reality of it. But your owners are going to come into you and they're going to say, how can we keep these people out, whoever they are? They don't understand how we live. They don't. They may have lived in another country where they do different things. You know what? Other countries have better standards than we have for a lot of things. You're going to see them doing things that we would never dream of. In England is an example. In England, pretty much, unless you're really, really, really poor, your windows are going to be immaculate, upstairs and down. They have window washers. Window washers. Poorest people in the street, they're going to pay somebody every 2 weeks or maybe every 3 weeks, and they're going to clean all their windows. That is a standard we don't have here. Can you imagine cleaning your windows at least once a month outside, completely house? That's a standard that you may see your new neighbors have that you don't have, and they're thinking, gosh, they don't clean their windows. And you're cutting your hedges like this every 3 weeks, and they say, oh, we don't do that. You know, we're smarter than that. We just do it twice a year. Well, you know, somehow you're going to have to figure it out. What is it that makes your community, what is it that makes your community unique? Think about that. That's what you want to communicate. Use your newsletters. As I say, you're not going to be a lot of do's and don'ts. This is our standard. Get everybody to agree to that, and they will. Most people, when they move into a community, look around and they say, oh gosh, even with your car. You park your car out, and it's like me. My car needs cleaning. I get so embarrassed. I think, oh my goodness, I haven't washed my car in 3 months, which is, you know, more than that probably. Everybody else's car is sparkling, and oh, I'm off to the car place to get my car clean. It's true for your front yard. It's true for debris in the yard. Most people are going to look around. They're going to say, this is the standard. Your job is to communicate that and to let them know not only that, but we've got something to look for the future. Do you have any questions? Thank you very much for your attention.